issue. Well, hello and welcome to this live telephone town hall with Congressman Tom Cole. My name is Sarah and I will be your moderator this evening. Tonight we are going to talk about the U.S. response to COVID-19, and our discussion will focus on what is being done to help small businesses in our communities navigate the severe and unforeseen economic challenges caused by this pandemic. To provide valuable insight and help answer your questions, we are very grateful to have a special guest on the line with us, Congressman Steve Chabot, who represents the 1st District of Ohio. And as the top Republican leader of the House Small Business Committee since 2015, Ranking Member Chabot has exceptional knowledge and understanding about the vital role of small business owners and entrepreneurs. And I know we have many of you on the line with us this evening, as well as numerous others who work for businesses on Main Street. Before Congressman Cole starts us off, know that you are in listen-only mode until you ask a question. If you'd like to be in the queue to ask a question, please press 0 on your telephone. Again, to ask a question this evening, please press 0, and you'll have the opportunity to describe your question and then return to listen. We might not have time for everyone's questions during the hour, but be sure to listen for your first name and location in case your question comes up. You'll have the chance to ask your question live on the call at that time. One last thing before we hear from Congressman Cole and Congressman Chabot. If you would like to opt in to future calls like this, please press 1 now. Again, to opt in to future telephone town hall discussions like this, press 1 now. Now we'll go live first with Congressman Cole, who will share some opening words and updates. Then we'll hear from Congressman Chabot as well. Congressman?
Thank you very much, Sarah. And let me begin by thanking, obviously, everybody on the call who's taken the time to listen and, if you like, ask a question. I'm going to just say a few words, and then I want to get to my good friend Steve Chabot. This, of course, has been a pretty consequential week. If you're watching television right now, you're probably watching the President and the Coronavirus Task Force actually lay out the basic conditions for reopening the country. It's going to be in stages, done differently in different parts of the country at the direction of the governor. So it's a pretty sophisticated way, but it does suggest that, we at some point in the not too distant future, the end of this month, if not before in some cases, we'll actually begin the process of gradually and hopefully safely reopening the country so that sadly, the virus is going to be with us for a long time. It's going to, it probably comes in waves. We're in the first one now. There may well be a couple more, certainly before we have a vaccine. So we're going to be dealing with it, but obviously we have to get folks back to work. This has been 3 tough weeks in a row. We now have 22 million Americans that have applied for unemployment insurance in the last 3 weeks. Most of them didn't want to do that. They had to do that because their jobs have been lost as we shut down various sectors of the economy to try and get ahead of the virus and keep as many people as possible safe. So we'll certainly be talking about that. But tonight's focus is really small business. Half the American workforce, if not more, work for small businesses. Those businesses are also generally the most vulnerable in a situation like this. They usually have the least in terms of cash reserves. They're most dependent upon cash flow. And Congress has done a number of things to try and help them weather the storm, which I know my good friend Congressman Chabot will go through shortly. And some of those programs, sadly, right now are a little bit at risk. Everybody agrees we need more money to help small business. We just haven't figured out a way to do it without in a bipartisan manner yet, but I'm comfortable we will. With that, let me introduce my good friend, Congressman Chabot. Steve has been in Congress really before I was, and so throughout my time, other than a 2-year interval, we've had the opportunity to serve together. He's the past chairman of the Small Business Committee. He's now what's called the ranking member, which it means the top Republican, so the top person in the minority party on that committee. He's also held important chairmanships of subcommittees on judiciary and foreign affairs, and he's genuinely, seen as probably the #1 expert on business issues in the House of Representatives. And I think beyond that is genuinely a guy that is popular on both sides of the aisle. And it's hard to be that way because he's also been a very strong opponent of what I would call wasteful spending. There's no question he's a real fiscal hawk. But more than that, he's knowledgeable, he's compassionate, he's caring, and he really, really tries to do and does do a tremendous job, not just for the people of his district, but more profoundly for the people of our country. So with that, Steve, let me turn it over to you for some opening thoughts, then we'll move to questions.
Thank you very much, Tom. And I thank you for your kind words. And I just want to begin by saying thank you to the people of Oklahoma for sending Tom Cole to Congress in the first place and keeping him coming back. He is a class act. He's one of my favorite members of Congress, really, on both sides. And I think he's probably the most highly respected member on both sides and about anybody I can think of. He really is a voice of reason. When things are kind of coming apart at the seams, he'll stand up in the conference and say something that makes eminent sense, and it almost always brings us together. So it's pretty amazing. You're lucky to have him. And I haven't said that about I've been on a bunch of these calls like I'm doing right now for other members of Congress all around the country, and I can't say that and didn't say that for the other folks. But Tom Cole is truly one of the good guys, and so thanks for sending him up there. And so let's talk about small business. And, of course, one more thing about Tom. He mentioned that I'm the ranking member of the House Small Business Committee, which is true. Tom, of course, is the ranking member of the Rules Committee, which is one of the most important committees in Congress. So that shows you how respected he is that he was put in that position and what a great job he does. Tom also mentioned how important small business is to our country. He's absolutely right. About half the people who work in America work for one of our small businesses. About 70% of the new jobs created in this country are created by small businesses, and they're under considerable pressure right now. The economy has been tough with the coronavirus and essentially shutting down the economy to a considerable degree. Many small businesses are shuttered through no fault of their own, and so Congress did pass, along with the President, legislation, the CARES Act, about 3 weeks ago. Tomorrow it'll be 3 weeks. And within a week of that, we had one of the important programs already up and starting to make loans within 1 week of actually passing the legislation, and that's the CARES Act. It was $2.2 trillion, $350 billion approximately of that, so about a third of $1 trillion, is the PPP, or Paycheck Protection Act. And it's a great program. Unfortunately, it literally exhausted the money today, and so they're not able to make any additional loans until Congress gets its act together and replenishes the fund. And I agree with Tom. I think we will do that. We really should have done it last week in the Senate. They tried to get votes on both sides to go along with replenishing it then at that time, so we wouldn't be in the position we are right now where it doesn't have any money to lend out. And we need that money, and it's money that's really being well spent to keep these small businesses alive, so that once we get on with reopening the country, we can reopen these businesses as well. And the way you get those loans, again, I think we're going to get the money back in, so let's talk about how you get them once we get the program open. Hopefully it's a matter of hours or days and not weeks. You go to your local bank or credit union. So your local community bank, credit union, you don't go to the SBA or Small Business Administration or to the government. You go to the bank, and they are able to give you the loans, assuming that they've gotten approved. And there's almost 5,000 banks across the country that now are SBA approved to give these loans. They're forgivable, meaning the odds are you're not going to have to pay them back for about an 8-week period of time. The main goal is to keep the payroll, to keep the employees on the pay, and now it will be forgiven if you spend the money for one of four things: payroll, or interest on the mortgage on your business, for example, at that location, for rent, or for utilities. So those four things, as long as you spend it for that, there's a pretty good chance that it'll all be forgiven, with one caveat. 75% of that has to go for the payroll part of that. And there's some industries, like the hotel industry, they don't like that, and they would like to see that change. And it's a possibility things could change in a phase 4 or some legislation down the road, but we don't know that for sure. The interest rates are low. It's 1%. And these are for companies, by the way, that are small businesses, so they're under 500 employees. There are a few exceptions to that, but basically it's under 500 employees. And this program, by the way, it wasn't, completely smooth sailing from the start. It took a lot of effort to get this thing open and functioning properly, because there were more loans given out in a week than we typically give out in a year. And the program literally just started. So the fact that it got up and the money's already been spent shows you how successful it was. But as I say, we just need to replenish it. Let me say just one more thing before I turn it back over to Tom and we talk about perhaps taking questions and things. And that's that there are some other loan programs that you might hear about. Sometimes people get these mixed up. One of those, for example, is the disaster loan program. It's called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, EIDL. That's the one where you can get a $10,000 advance. And now they did cut that back because that one was running out of money also. So they cut it back to $1,000 per employee, up to 10 employees. So that's where they got the $10,000. It wasn't that way initially, but as the money started getting low, they wanted to make sure that as many small businesses they had access to that money. So they made some adjustments, and that was one of them. You can take advantage of both those types of loans as long as you spend them for different things. Maybe one you use, the PPP you might use for your payroll because you know it'll be forgiven to get you up to 75% of it being the payroll. So maybe you do the payroll on that, and maybe you pay for something else with the other one, the disaster loan program. So again, I don't want to get too much in the weeds here right up front, but I think I'll leave it there, Tom. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, Steve, thanks. And just one point to make before I ask Sarah to open it up for questions. Last numbers I saw, and I'm sure they're higher than this would have been as of, I think, Wednesday. Over 26,000 of those loans have been made in Oklahoma for over $4 billion. So that's a pretty significant impact on a state our size. 26,000 different small businesses getting access to $4 billion that they almost certainly will not have to repay as long as they abide by those conditions that Congressman Chabot laid out. So with that, Sarah, let's open it up for questions.
Great.
And direct the questions to Steve.
Well, we have a lot of questions related to small businesses, so I think he'll have a lot of good things to say in response to the questions. But quick reminder that if you would like to ask a question, you'll just press 0, and then you'll record your question, and then return to listen. And be sure to listen for your first name and locations in case that question comes up. Our first question comes from Judy from Davis.
Hi, Judy. It's Tom. Go ahead.
Tom.
It should be coming live.
Yes, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, my question mostly has been answered. I was asking about these loans. I have been given 2 sets of papers with 2 completely different things, and I have an appointment tomorrow at the bank at 1 o'clock. Do you think there will be more funds available? And when you say small business, you're saying 500. I'm talking about a restaurant that I've had for 44 years that has 10 employees. And it's just as important to me as it is to somebody with 500 employees because my people live week to week, and we've, of course, everybody was 2 weeks behind, so they had 2 weeks after we closed worth of pay, but now we're down to nothing. And my business is closed. I worry about the mortgages, and I worry about taxes, and the Oklahoma Tax Commission doesn't quit just because the rest of the world is shut down. There's penalties. There's everything in the world. These loans are so desperately needed by mom-and-pop operations. And I know mom-and-pop and small business is 2 different things, but it's very important that the funding become available.
Well, couldn't agree with you more. And I'm going to turn to Steve real quickly, but look, I believe those we will get money back into this program. And you're exactly right. And actually, the vast majority, hasn't gone to people with 500 employees. It really is mostly operations like you're describing. Small businesses, relatively small number of employees. But of course, as we all know, that's the backbone of the economy. That's the backbone of certainly Main Street in Oklahoma. And so, I can just assure you that I know Steve will be doing everything we possibly can to make sure there's additional funds for this. Steve, let me turn it over to you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Tom. She's just the type of person that this program was intended to help. You obviously don't have to have 500 employees. 10 is right in the wheelhouse, and so if you have an appointment tomorrow, I would definitely keep that. Now you may have, I'm sure you're going to have some banks that are going to say, let's wait until next week or the following week or whatever because of the money, and they don't necessarily want to put additional effort in if they don't think the money's going to be there. But I agree with Tom. I think we will, hopefully sooner rather than later, get this fund replenished and the money will be there. So I would keep that appointment and act as if the money's there, but unfortunately it may add a few more days on your stress there. And so anyway, I'd keep the appointment.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. But just a reminder to those on the call that if you would like to ask a question, just press 0 to record that question and then return to listen. Our next question comes from Julia from Duncan.
Hey, Julia.
Hello.
Tom, how are you?
I'm great,
Hi.
thank you. Thank y'all for taking time to visit with us. My question is, in 2018, we had a great year at our business. It is oil related. We own a plating company in Duncan. Our taxes look great. So my 2018 taxes keep me from being eligible for the stimulus. But my question is, I'm trying to get the 2019 submitted because last year we took probably a 75% hit on our business. And so our income is drastically reduced. And especially right now, we're just operating on pennies. So would that change anything if I get my 2019 taxes in now? Would I be eligible for that stimulus check? And the other, I am going to ask a second question.
Surely.
I understand that the House is not in session and won't be until May 6th or 5th, somewhere in there. Okay, thank you. And do we have to wait that long before something goes before the President, an agreement on the additional funds?
No. A couple questions. Actually, we are technically in session. That is, they meet in the chamber every day. We operate under something that's called unanimous consent, which means as long as nobody objects and agreements have been arrived at beforehand, we can move the money or move any other piece of legislation. Now, getting everybody to agree to everything sometimes can be quite a chore, but the reality is we've done 3 supplementals in a row related to coronavirus. There's been very little partisan dissent. And so this could move. We could get this money to the President as soon as, and again, the leadership of both parties agree this $250 billion needs to be put into this successful Paycheck Protection Program. But Democrats want additional money for hospitals, another $100 billion, additional money, $150 billion for state, local, and tribal governments. Those things, by the way, are not necessarily out of reach. We already have voted money for them. But let me just give you the example of hospitals. We've already put back, you've got a great one in Duncan, we've dispersed $30 billion last week. There's another tranche out of 100. There's another tranche coming. So there's no immediate need. We're working through as fast as we can. Same with state and local governments, $150 billion. We understand that they've lost a lot of income. That money has not quite gotten out yet, but it will get out very soon. So the argument is let's do something we agree on where we've exhausted the money, then come back and we'll continue to work on these other areas. And it's silly, in my view, not to, again, put the $250 billion in there. In terms of your taxes, I'm going to let Steve respond to as much of this as he wants, but it's my understanding if your tax is that way, they'll go on the 219 tax return if they have it. So I really would recommend you get that in, and it may take a little extra work because you weren't there, but I wouldn't think so. I mean, once they're appropriating that stimulus money, that $1,200 per adult and up to $500 per child on the basis, I think, of your 2019 tax return. So let me turn it over to Steve. And Steve, don't hesitate to correct me if I got something wrong.
No, I think you're exactly right, Tom. And I do think, as you indicated, since we're going under unanimous consent, I think there's a very good chance that this will get resolved, hopefully within the next couple of days, and that'll be replenished. And I doubt if, although in the House last time, one member can object and end up bringing, a lot of the members, about half of us went back last time, so that could happen again. But before I turn the tax question over to Rob, who is our tax expert, let me just mention that, and I think most people probably know this, that we did extend from April 15th to July 15th, tax day, basically, both having to file them as well as pay your taxes. So, and there were a lot of other things in that legislation that obviously we didn't necessarily mention. We gave $150 billion to state, tribal, and local governments, $100 billion for hospitals and healthcare providers, and the direct payment checks of $1,200 or $2,400 plus $500 per child, and a number of other things also. But Rob, since you're our tax expert, why don't you comment on her question about the 2018-2019 tax issue?
Sure. Both Congressman Chabot and Congressman Cole are absolutely correct. They're first going to be looking at your 2019 returns. If you do not have your 2019 returns, then they will then go to your 2018. But their first stop is going to be the 2019. So that will be the first one they take a look at.
Okay, Sarah, next question.
Sure. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question. But if you would like to ask a question, just press 0 to record that question and then return to listen. And if you'd like to opt into future telephone town halls like this, press 1. Our next question is Richard from Lawton.
Hey, Richard. How are you?
Are you there, Richard?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Great.
Hello.
Sorry. Am I still there?
Yes, you are.
Okay. I'll make it quick. I'm in Lawton, Oklahoma. I own 3 businesses, but they're all small, a total of 8 employees. And as soon as the ability for the small business loan applications were available, I put one in, and I've already gotten it, and I've already paid my employees their checks. But they've already turned in a request for unemployment because they were unemployed. So as I gave them the checks today, which I normally give it on a Friday, I gave it to them early because I had it. I told them to go ahead and take their names off the rolls, and they tried to do it, and the phones are so busy, they keep saying that they'll get back with them. Is there any way we can expedite that?
I'll kick that over to you, Steve, just with one observation, which is please remember we've never had 22 million people claim unemployment in a 3-week period in the history of the United States. I mean, literally, the first really big week, 3 weeks ago, 6.6 or 8 million people claimed unemployment. That was 10 times higher than any previous week in recorded history. We followed with another week like that, and today it was a little bit quote-unquote better, but it's still over 5 million people. So I will say this in defense of the folks at the unemployment, they are dealing with volumes like they've never, ever seen before. So they're working really hard. They're trying to do this, but I'm sure they're going to try and go as fast as they can. They're also, by the way, operating on pretty old computer systems as well. So a lot of challenges there. Steve, you have any comments?
Yeah, I do, Tom, and then I'll turn it over to my staff just to fill any holes that I might have left. And you're right, Tom. I've been doing these town hall meetings all over the country, and we're hearing the same thing relative to how busy the unemployment agencies are all across the country, virtually every state. And our unemployment is handled, a little bit different in the United States, because every state has their own unemployment office, and they handle that. What we did is in the CARES Act that we passed about 3 weeks ago, we put an additional $600 over and above whatever they're getting at the state level. And there was, had been some concern about that much money that some people, not all, but some people, it could be a disincentive to go back to work. And one can make an argument as to whether that's true or not, but certainly a lot of small businesses were concerned about that. But as far as the long waits and how long it's taking, that is uniform across the country. People are just having a heck of a hard time because of the sheer volume of calls. They're just inundated with calls at the state level, and the federal uninsurance not uninsurance, but the check that people are receiving, which is for it's the unemployment check. That's on top of whatever the state gives. Joe or Rob, you want to add anything to that?
Sure, sir. Mr. Chabot, this is Joe. This is a conundrum that a lot of employers all across the country are facing right now, because with the generous benefits that were given out via UI at the state level, and then the additional $600 that were given out at the federal level, it's going to be tough to get those specific employees back, especially if they can make more money by collecting unemployment than they can by whatever was being paid to them beforehand. But it's important to know that it is not the same employees. It's all about headcount. If you have 12 employees and 2 of them decide that they would rather do the unemployment insurance for the short term, all you need to do is try and find 2 other folks to replace those folks. It is a conundrum. But it's all about headcount. You don't necessarily have to hire or rehire the same folks back. So it's all about headcount.
And just to add on to what Joe's saying here, I think what he means is if you want to have it forgiven, you have to have you have to have basically the number of employees that you started out with or something close to it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same employees. But it sounds like in this gentleman's case, the employees are trying to be cooperative and do the right thing here. They just haven't been able to get through at the unemployment office. If I understand the question.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. And if you'd like to ask a question of anyone on the call tonight, please press 0. And to opt into future telephone town halls, press 1. Linda from Newcastle, you're live.
Hi, Linda. This is Tom. How are you?
Hello, Mr. Cole. It's nice to speak with you this evening. My husband is a trim carpenter. He's the owner-operator, so it's just one single employee himself. We went through, before we knew the actual application process, we went online through the SBA COVID-19 application and filled it out and got a confirmation number that they had received it, and found out afterwards that we needed to do on that and the PPP, get a lender to participate with us. Our bank that we utilize is not certified to participate in either one of these programs. And when I called the Economic Injury Disaster, she recommended 3 different banks in Oklahoma, and I've attempted calling those 3 banks, and since we are not a business established with their bank prior to February the 1st, they are refusing to take the application or become our lender. Now, what can you suggest to remedy that problem?
Boy,
Yeah, that's
respond immediately to you, Steve.
okay. Sure. Yeah, it's a challenge, and what we've seen, there are a number of banks that just either didn't want to do it or they didn't want to. They were going to customers that they already had an established relationship with, and some banks did not. They were taking their own customers first, and then you had other banks that weren't SBA lenders in the first place, and so it took quite a while for these lenders to become SBA authorized lenders. I haven't said this very clearly, but so it can be a combination of those two issues that you're dealing with. And let me turn it over to Joe and Rob to clean that up, because I didn't really explain that very well.
Sure. This is Joe, and I'm gonna kick it to Rob. I've heard him answer this question before, so let's go to Rob Yaber.
Sure, and thanks for the question. And just to kind of start off, it's great to hear from folks on the ground that are experiencing some of these problems, because that's how we can then take these issues and go to the SBA and the Treasury Department with some suggestions. You know, we want to hear what's working, what's not working. So this is a valuable, very valuable conversation. Your specific concern, as Congressman Chabot was saying, it did take private lenders a bit to get up and running, and that is on the PPP side. That is the Paycheck Protection Program side. On the other side is the Small Business Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, and that is going to be directly through the SBA. And I think at the beginning of your statement, you said you started working with SBA directly on their website, and that's exactly where you need to be for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Back to your PPP question, at the beginning, banks had trouble winding up. Part of the reason with that is there was a process at SBA to get them certified, and then the second step was for SBA and Treasury to get out guidance to them. So at the beginning, yes, we all saw some delays, some roadblocks. Each day has been getting better. Today was better than yesterday. Tomorrow is going to be better than today, outside of the funding issues, but just the operations within the lending area. So our suggestion is there's a few things you can do. There's some great tools on SBA's website called Lender Match, where you can type in your information, and they can help you to identify a few banks. And I think that's probably what you did. Our suggestion is to continue to talk to folks. As Congressman Cole mentioned, there's been a number of loans handed out in the state, and that's a high volume. So there are banks operating. One last suggestion: maybe reach out to Congressman Cole's staff, and they can talk to us, and we could try to figure out where you need to go. But making sure you touch base with your previous lenders. They may have been onboarded onto the program. Check out SBA's website, the Lender Match tool there. Contact Congressman Cole's office. I'm sure they'll be able to help as well.
Well, we'd certainly be happy to take a shot at it. Sarah, how about the next question?
Sure. Our next question comes from Harlan from Moore.
Hey, Harlan, this is Tom. How are you?
Hey, Tom. Well, we're doing all right right now. We did get our stimulus check for our family of four today. But I needed to find out a little bit more about this. I am an independent contractor. I do Uber and Lyft. And this is mainly our only income, and have not worked since the 17th of last month. So it was getting really tight just before we got this stimulus check. But I did go ahead and try to get applied for through the SBA. I did do that. I got a confirmation what Linda was talking about, so you guys pretty much answered that question for me. But the other is about the unemployment, and I got a denial letter in the mail. But before I got that denial, I had somebody that was on the phone that said I was escalated to a Tier 2, and I was supposed to hear from somebody by 5 o'clock today, and I did not hear from anybody. So I don't know really what to do with that. Do I need to just call them back in the morning and see if I can talk to somebody? Because they denied me because I'm an independent contractor and I don't have the income on there, but I have it on my tax return.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me take a crack, and then Steve, you and your staff probably know more about this than I do. I would call back. We did make some changes to make people that are normally not eligible for unemployment eligible this time. And it sounds to me, since you're an independent contractor, as if you would be. But let me ask Steve if he and his staff know more about that than me and have a different point of view.
Yeah, and Tom, you're right. Let me say a couple things, and then I'll turn it over to the staff to wrap it up here. The program for independent contractors and self-employed did not, it was a week behind everybody else. So we passed this legislation 3 weeks ago, and then 2 weeks ago it opened up for small businesses and sole proprietors. But it was only last Friday, so it's been less than a week that you would have been eligible for, PPP loan, and that was the independent contractor or self-employed. So, and there was a lot of question. People were hearing that they weren't eligible, and they were eligible, they just weren't eligible yet. And then a week after that, we're out of money. So folks like yourself have been in a particularly precarious position, unfortunately. And Rob or Joe, do you want to wrap the gentleman's question up there?
Sure. This is Joe, and I'm probably going to kick it to Rob. But when it comes to the 1099, if you're a 1099 miscellaneous filer on your taxes and all of that, you are eligible to apply for your own PPP loan. It doesn't have to have anything to do with the folks that you're working for, the folks you're working with. You've got your own avenue to do that. It's a little bit in flux right now, considering the fact that the program's out of money right now, and we're hoping we can get to it and get more money in there. But if you are a 1099 filer, you've got your own path to get your own PPP loan. Rob, please correct me if I misspoke or said anything incorrectly.
No, that's absolutely correct, Joe. And maybe I'll just kind of walk through the differences real quickly for the PPP program and how you would be treated as an independent contractor. Again, as Congressman Chabot mentioned, the PPP program is available for businesses with employees and those without employees. Now, the main loan up front that you're going to receive is going to be calculated based on your average payroll costs per month over the last 12 years times 2.5. Well, for an independent contractor, that is going to be a little bit different. There's going to be a separate calculation for you. So just kind of wanted to outline that. That's going to be how you are eligible, independent contractors, self-employed, and sole proprietors are eligible for PPP. Going back to kind of your original question on UI and where that lies under the CARES Act, again, this isn't an area where we concentrated much effort. Our team, we stated on the PPP Paycheck Protection Program. However, I know there is language in the CARES Act that looked at self-employed under the UI benefits.
On that formula you laid out, you mentioned the last 12 years. I assume you meant the last 12 months in terms of...
I do apologize. Yes, it's
okay.
2.5 times your average monthly payroll for the last 12 months.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. We'll go ahead and move on to our next question. Next one comes from Bob from Norman.
Hey, Bob. How are you?
Just fine. Yeah, I'm from Norman. I think you have been just touching on this, but to clarify, if we take the loan, how do we verify that we actually spent 75% of that on employees versus on other expenses?
That's a great question. Let me ask Steve about that.
Yeah, we've answered this question a number of times, and Rob does a great job of it, so I'm going to turn that over to Rob.
Sure. I kind of talked a little bit about the front-end loan calculation, and then again, that is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll over the last 12 months. You're going to take that number. That's going to be your loan amount. Moving over into the forgiveness piece, which is exactly what you're discussing, you're going to have two qualifiers to get into the forgiveness section. One, you're going to maintain your payroll continuity, and that's essentially having your head count maintained during the covered period. You're going to sit down with your lender, and through documentation, payroll documents, you're going to be looking at that covered period, your average head count, and you're going to bump it up against either two different time periods, either January through the end of February or February 15th through, I believe the date is April. So you have the option to kind of look at how your payroll, your head count is during that time period. The second piece is the amount of loan forgiveness that you could receive. And that's going to be determined based on the amount of salaries and wages actually going out the door. If over the covered period you maintain 75% of your salaries and wages, you are able to receive full forgiveness. And your question exactly, the 75-25 split, 75% is going to be maintained on payroll, and the 25% has to be on rent, utilities, or mortgage interest. You're going to be working with your lender and documenting both payroll documents and a number of other documents to show that they were used on the mortgage interest, rent, and utilities. So, yes, there are going to be some documents that you're going to have to sit down with your lender and discuss, but everything should be outlined in the application, and the lender should be able to help you with that as well. So.
Great. Well, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question. And if you'd like to ask a question, just press 0 to record that question and then return to listen. Our next question is from April from Ardmore.
Hey, April. How are you?
Hi. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So my question, I know, we're going to, there are loan programs available, and then the PPP, which can be forgiven. I guess I should mention I'm a small business owner with 4 employees of a small insurance agency. And my question is, what about lost income? Is there going to be anything to help small businesses for the income that we're losing?
Steve, I'm going to kick that to you and your team.
Yeah, well, you do have the EIDL loans, but Joe or Rob, you want to go into more detail about what may be helpful to a business owner in that situation with lost income?
Sure, Congressman Chabot. This is Joe. I wish I had a better answer. The idea of the payroll protection plan was to try and keep folks employed, to try and keep your business open. These are uncharted territories. I seriously wish I had a better answer for you on that one. But yeah, it's tough for everybody. Rob, do you have anything to kick in here?
Sure. Just kind of mention what the loans can actually go for. So on the EIDL loan side, the economic injury disaster loan side, there's no restrictions on what you can use the loan for. You could use it for payroll. You could use it for inventory, working capital. On the PPP side, you can use it for payroll costs, and that is the main item where you'll receive forgiveness. You could also use it for other items. That portion won't be forgiven. You can't use it for inventory or working capital. But you technically could use that for those types of items. Again, you can get a EIDL and a PPP at the same time. However, the only requirement is they can't be used for the same item. So you could use your idle for overhead, inventory, or another item, and then use your PPP for payroll costs. So try to be as flexible as possible, except when it came to that forgiveness. As Joe said, it was really earmarked to for businesses that currently have zero revenue to pay for their employees.
But, Rob, none of that would be available for lost income. Is that correct?
No. Right now, there's nothing on the table for technical lost income. I just kind of wanted to run through the different
I think that's helpful. I just want to be very clear on that point. It doesn't mean Congress wouldn't come back at some point and look at that, but I certainly wouldn't want you to base your plans on something we haven't done yet.
Yeah, none of these plans are really going to make people whole. They're just trying to get us through this short period, hopefully an 8-week period, so people can literally survive. But everybody's probably going to be, a little worse off, and in some cases a lot worse off. There was an interesting thing. We talked about the business insurance. Rob and Joe, you want to talk about that? We had this in some of the insurance policies, and then SARS happened. And the insurance companies basically then rewrote them to kind of protect themselves. Do you want to talk about that issue, because that's a little related to what the lady has asked here?
Sure. This is Joe. I'll start and then I'll kick it to Rob. But when it comes to the business insurance, the problem was after the 2008 SARS epidemic, which was obviously nothing what we are dealing with today. But the insurance companies decided that they were going to not pay for anything that was pandemic or virus related. I'm not sure if that those are the correct words, but yeah. So it is definitely a problem where the insurance agencies have decided to not cover things like this, and it's definitely a problem going forward, because we've never had a problem like this before.
Yeah. So, in other words, like if you're a business and you have business insurance, if you had a fire and your building burned down, you have the fire insurance and that rebuilds the building for you. But what about all the lost income for those months? Well, if you have that type of insurance, it would cover your loss. So logically, you'd think that, well, how about covering something like this? It's like kind of like a fire. It's putting me out of business for this period of time, and so how about so what a lot of the insurance companies did is they went back and changed this so that, yes, if it's fire damage or hurricane or something like that, you can, if you have that kind of insurance, be compensated for your lost income on your business for when it's down. But they've gone back in pandemics like this, and they kind of learned their lesson with SARS. Most of them, almost all of them, now have an exclusion, so you're not really covered for your lost income during that period of time. And there has been some talk about us going back and, passing legislation about that, maybe requiring that to be covered. The problem with that is most insurance is handled by the states and not by the federal government. So, and every state is different. So the odds of us actually taking that up are probably not all that good. But
yeah,
didn't mean to go into too much detail about that. But
no, if we were to do something like that, the only comparable thing I can think of is something like terrorism insurance, where the federal government is an insurer of last resort, because most insurance companies won't cover that. And we do have a flood insurance program, but it's got lots of problems with it, I must say, where we play a similar kind of role. So there isn't anything out there now that would protect you in the insurance realm, unless it's very specific, very unusual. Sarah, why don't we go to the next question?
Sure. Our next question comes from Kim from Ada.
Hey, Kim, how are you?
I sure appreciate your call. Enjoy these every week.
But my question is, I'm a small business owner. I'm self-employed. I have one employee. And I guess I was a little bit optimistic and held off on filing for the PPP until yesterday. And today I hear that we've run out of money. Should I advise my employee to go ahead and file for unemployment, because I've been paying it out of my pocket, and I don't know how long we can continue to do this, because not only their salary, but we cover all their medical expenses, their insurance and medical expenses as part of their employee benefit. And so it's pretty expensive. Their medical benefit is 2 times what their salary is.
Yeah, that is a tough call. I want to be very hesitant about giving you advice that I can't back up. All I can tell you, I guess, is this, and then I'll ask Steve for his opinion. Number one, I do think there will be more money in this program, and so I think eventually you'll get it, but I can't guarantee you that. I mean, I wish I could, but I can't. I just really strongly believe this is such an important program. There's such strong bipartisan support that eventually folks will kind of come to the conclusion this has to happen. If we have to do something else to get this, we'll look at that. But the two sides will find a way to get this funded. So that's the first point I'd make. The second point I would make is that, you need to think this through in terms of your best interest. That that unemployment insurance is there for a reason, and neither you nor your employee should feel bad about it if that is the avenue that makes the most sense. Yeah, I would just say from a policymaker standpoint, the most important thing for us is for you to be able to get your business back up and operational again. That's what we really want to happen. So whichever decision assists you in doing that, is the one you should take. But again, I do think in the end, PPP will be funded, but I can't guarantee it, and I can't tell you an exact date. Steve, you have any advice or observation?
I think you hit that one out of the park, Tom. My only one thing I would really add, you may want to also talk to, your local lender that you were either. Did you say who had already? You just did it yesterday. Did you say? Yeah, I think he said. Yeah, I think he said he just filed. So I would go back and have a conversation with them. But Tom's right. We're not really allowed to give advice out, or we're not supposed to give advice on something like that. Which way should you go? But it's a tough decision, no question about it. And obviously the timing ended up being tough for you. You certainly have our sympathy, and I, as Tom said, I certainly hope and I expect us to fund this program again. So I think it will be there for you, but until it is, obviously you're in a tough position.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to our next question, and this one comes from John from Midwest City.
Hey, John, how are you?
Hey, Tom, how are you?
Doing good.
I appreciate y'all doing these every week. I listen in.
Great.
We were just notified, actually during the call, I broke off and took the call from our banker, and we did not make the cut for getting the loan. So we're still sitting there. My question is, we anticipated that today, that since we hadn't heard back from the lender, are they going to require us to resubmit new application?
That's a great question. I don't think so, but Steve, do you know?
No, I don't think so either, but let's ask the experts. Joe or Rob, have you heard that question before?
Sure, Congressman Chabot. This is Joe. We just don't know. This is uncharted territory. The politics that have gone on with this. I really wish I had an answer, and I would expect, given my experience, to have an answer, but I don't. And this is uncharted territory. I would hope that the banks would continue to hang on to all of that stuff. as things are going, as new things come in, but we just don't know. We don't know. And I apologize. I apologize for not having the answer.
Well, that's something we'll work on getting an answer for.
Yeah.
I suspect lots of members, every member will have exactly that same question because there are going to be people in every congressional district caught in exactly this circumstance. It just seems to me unfair to make you go back and have to apply again if you've got an application that's in order. We just got exhausted for funds. The bank ought to hold that, and if we can get this replenished, which I fully expect we can, hopefully they'll help you. But we'll try and raise that issue and get you an answer.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we have time for one or two more questions. Definitely one more question. And that question we'll go to next is Jeffrey from Lawton.
Hey, Jeffrey, how are you?
Fine. How are you?
Good.
I'm a landlord, and I rent to numerous. I just have little strip centers. I rent to like 10 or 11 hair salon, nail, tattoo, barbershop type places, and they were all some of the first ones shut down because they're in close contact. And I still also have other stores, retail, small little shops, bridal shops, different things. And I have not heard anything being done for landlords. Many of my tenants will receive their $1,200 this week and will go out and spend it on groceries because they have to. A lot of them make a lot more than the $1,200, but I'm not hearing anything. A lot of them will not be able to pay the rent. They'll may start working in later May or June, and maybe we'll pay June's rent, but for these time, April and May in between, they'll have no chance to make that back. They struggle enough to pay the rent as it is. And what advice do you have for somebody who's in the land? I hear about loans, this one idle loan they were talking about, but I don't really want to spend the next 10 years paying back something because the government shut my businesses down here. I don't have employees. I can't do the PPP loan. Is there any? I was not always hearing the whole call, so I don't know if you've addressed this at any point. But is there anything being done for landlords who simply had all their customers be closed and not be able to pay the rent?
Yeah, Rob, why don't you
address the question?
Yeah, we really haven't. Rob, why don't you handle that one if you wouldn't mind?
Sure. So kind of run through just the qualifiers to get into the Paycheck Protection Program. As Congressman Chabot and Congressman Cole suggested, it is actually open to employees, businesses with employees and businesses without employees. And those would be independent contractors, sole proprietors, and those that are self-employed. The couple qualifiers to get into the program, be a small business, which is generally under 500 employees, be in operation on February 15th, and have employees on February 15th. That obviously changes the employee section if you do not have any employees within your business. But those are the general qualifiers. Additionally, there are some rules in place in the underlying programs at SBA that look at passive companies, and that's real estate and landlords. So there are some rules that apply that SBA in the past have looked at and have had some concerns with investors in the program. So just kind of wanted to give you the full picture at SBA as you kind of explore your options, and that will apply both to the PPP program and the EIDL program. Within the CARES Act, there is a number of different categories of funds available, and some of them are for the much larger folks, but just kind of give you the background, there's a larger $500 billion exchange stabilization fund. That's kind of for the larger folks. Then the Main Street lending program over at the Treasury, that's going to be for folks as well. So there were a number of options, but we hear you. And, our suggestion, talk to your lenders. see if they have some ideas for you as well. That's our first suggestion. We don't want anybody to make eligibility decisions on their own and potentially miss out. So a great first stop would be with the lender, but no, there are some SBA underlying rules and regulations out there as well.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll move to our closing remarks. But Donald from Cash.
Hey, Donald, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Congressman Cole. Congressman, I was wondering, we have in the past, I'm a military retiree, but in the past, there were provisions that strategically important industries and suppliers for strategically important things had to be produced in the United States or from one of our extremely close allies, such as Canada. Now, is there any way that we can turn this reliance on Chinese goods and manufacturing to help some of the small businesses, maybe take tariffs that are applied and pay those directly to those producers? Or perhaps is there a way to make the income tax deductibility for corporations who purchase imported goods less valuable than people who purchase items made here in the United States?
I think. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I haven't got a solution. I was just. This is a problem we need to address, just so that we don't get caught in the situation where we're relying on a not an adversary, but a competitor at least, that to provide for our vital resources.
Well, let me just speak for myself, and then I'll ask Steve what he thinks. I can assure you that there's going to be, I would certainly support doing something like that, and I think there will be a major effort in Congress to correct these supply chain issues. We do exactly what you say on a number of strategic industries now. For instance, I mean, we could probably build a warship cheaper in South Korea, but we don't want to build warships any place. We want to build them in our own country. We want to maintain the industrial base that it takes to do that. So we do this in a variety of areas that are important in our defense area. I think we've now gotten a pretty sobering lesson on how important everything is, from the basic elements of pharmaceuticals to protective, personal equipment, to masks, to those kind of things. So I will be very surprised if we don't figure out a number of ways to incentivize American companies to be involved in these areas. And if it costs us a little bit more, it costs us a little bit more. We can't be in a situation, and we have 150-odd countries around the world right now in one way or another that are dealing with this. And obviously the temptation's always, we're going to keep whatever we're producing here at home. We can't afford to send it overseas, even if somebody is dependent on that. So, again, I think we'll see probably a major look at this by Congress, multiple pieces of legislation, but my guess is over time, quite a bit of the supply chain for pharmaceuticals and for equipment will, be brought back in the United States one way or another. Steve, again, you may have a different view, so I'm very interested in your opinion.
No, I agree completely with you, Tom. I think you answered that question perfectly, really. I do think that there is going to be even more of an effort to buy American, try to get the products made here as much as possible, bring those jobs back. The president's been talking about that for quite some time now. And there was a story that I saw on the national news just tonight, about an hour before we came on this call, and they were talking about there's now evidence that China, obviously China wasn't completely transparent with the rest of the world about how this thing started and what was going on, and they were out there apparently buying up PPE, the masks, and all this kind of stuff out on the open market and hoarding this stuff. And that's one of the reasons it has been tougher for the U.S. and other countries to get that stuff, because China knew they had a big problem and they were out there buying it before anybody else even knew there was a problem. So we need to really learn a lesson from this so that we're ready next time. I agree with you completely, Tom.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we are near the end of our telephone town hall. I'm sorry we weren't able to get to all of your questions, but we did get to a lot of questions, a lot of good information. And you'll have the opportunity to leave a message and receive a call back from our office after Congressman Cole provides some final words. Congressman?
Well, first of all, let me begin by thanking my good friend Steve Chabot and his team on the Small Business Committee staff for joining us and providing some really needed insight and certainly expertise. The commitment I'll make to everybody on the call, we'll continue to work these problems. Again, Steve has been a leader on these issues of protecting and enhancing opportunities for small business really throughout his career. And so, he's one of the guys on both sides of the aisle on these issues. Honestly, people look to, certainly, particularly on our side of the aisle. So we're going to keep working this stuff. We also, I don't think are going to take no for an answer in terms of refilling this PPP fund one way or the other. I'm convinced Congress is going to do that, and I certainly am going to do everything I can. A lot of this bill has a lot of pieces in it, and a lot of them are necessary. We need to help our hospitals. We need to help state and local and tribal governments. We're just pushing $30 billion out the door to colleges and universities and K through 12 and every school district. I was actually on the phone earlier today doing that. But this PPP program has been the most successful, the most popular, and has kept millions of Americans from having to go to file for unemployment. It's allowed them and their companies to stay in place. And I don't know of a better use of the dollars than that, because again, these businesses and their employees are all in trouble over something that is not their fault in any way, shape, or form. And they're responding in many cases to the orders from federal and state and local officials that they've got to put everything they've poured their lifetime in at risk, and their employees are also at risk. We've just got to find ways that those folks have an opportunity to preserve what they've created and come back and participate again in the economy as they were doing extraordinarily well. But we'll keep fighting. Steve, I'm going to let you close it out with any final thoughts you might have.
I'll be real brief, Tom. Thanks for giving us the opportunity, and I want to thank my staff for answering the questions, et cetera. And I want to thank the people of Oklahoma's 4th Congressional District for sending one of the good guys to Washington. I think of another member who works as hard as Tom Cole does for his constituents. He's always bringing the folks back in Oklahoma up and just working his tail off for them and making sure that they get their fair share. We're committed, both Tom and I, to get that PPP funding out there for those who haven't been able to take advantage of it yet. So, Tom, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope you and your constituents, hey, we're all going to get through this, and it'll be good to be looking at this in the rearview mirror at some point. But boy, haven't the American people stepped up? It's heartening to see how the country really.
Amen to all of that, my friend.
Thank you, Congressman.
Sarah, you
sure.
want to go ahead and close this out?
I will. Thank you, Congressman Cole, and thank you, Congressman Chabot, Rob, and Joe for providing your special insight for small businesses tonight. And thanks to everyone who joined tonight's call. If you'd like to leave a message, 1 now. Again, if you'd like to leave a message, please press 1 now.